When it comes to the IELTS Writing Task 1, the academic module, there are only two kinds of graphs: trend and comparison. You must know the differences between these graphs, because if you don't know, you will not get better than 5 ever, even if you put a lot of effort into analyzing and using grammar, the vocabulary that you think that may score. You will not. This is the very first step when you start describing a graph in IELTS Writing Task 1, the academic module. And if you don't do this step well, everything will fall apart. So let me help you with that, all right? So hey, welcome back to Everything IELTS, a series where I help you achieve your target IELTS band score. And this is Huyen, your favorite IELTS trainer. I'm also the founder of practice9.co, where you can get free practice tests and a lot of free tips and apps. Check it out, practice9.co. Now, let's get back to our topic of today's video: how to distinguish between a trend and a comparison. But before that, let's talk about why you must do that. If you don't do it right, task achievement will not be met. Because in task achievement in IELTS Writing Task 1, you are supposed to be able to describe the details on a graph appropriately. So I have created this comparison table so you can see the differences between the both kinds, and we'll keep bringing it back so you will see the whole picture and why task achievement will be heavily affected if you don't know the differences between a trend and a comparison. Second, because task achievement is not met, you would not make a lot of sense in your writing. So coherence and cohesion would be affected too. And believe me, if you identify a wrong kind of chart, you will not be able to sound very logical. And yourself, you also feel like your writing is a mess. Grammar and vocabulary will also be affected because, let's face it, because they are different. They are two different kinds of charts. That's why the language that we must use and the vocabulary that we must use in each kinds of graph reports would be different, right? So the first step is to tell whether you are having a trend or a comparison chart. That step itself is worth 5 bands in IELTS Writing Task 1, the academic module overall. So with that step, you will use more vocabulary, more grammar, and then you will be able to distinguish between different details, which details to include, which details to exclude, and how to group the details, all of that, so you can get better than 5. But if you don't know the differences between a trend and a comparison, unfortunately, you're not going to get even 5. But you don't worry, okay? I'm here to help you. In this video, we are talking about the differences between a trend and a comparison. A trick for you to identify is very, very easy. All right, so just pay attention. Now, let me bring back the table that I created. This table is here, and at the end of the video, you will see the full picture of the differences between a trend and a comparison chart, all right? Now, this is what a trend chart looks like. You may be calling it a line chart, you may have seen it, and you may be familiar with this. It makes sense to call it a line chart, okay? There's nothing wrong with that because there are lines over here. But I call it a trend chart because it represents the nature of this chart and what it presents to us. I will talk about it in a little bit, so don't worry about this, okay? So this is what a trend chart looks like, or a line chart looks like. On this chart, as you can see, on this axis, you have something related to time. Sometimes it can be years, sometimes it can be months, or sometimes it can be decades, things like that. Many different things, but it has to be time related. And on the y-axis over here, you will have something related to the numbers. Sometimes you can have percentage as the data over here. At this point, I want you to pause the video so that you can look at this graph. Take a very good look at this graph to understand and to remember what it looks like, because I'm going to show you the comparison chart right now. So this is a comparison chart, and you may be calling it a bar chart because, yeah, there are bars over here. Makes sense to call it bar chart. However, again, I call it a comparison chart because it represents the meaning of this chart. What this chart actually presents to us. So this is a comparison chart. We have 3 different elements. We have A, B, and C. And on the y-axis, of course, we have the numbers. Again, sometimes it can be percentage. In this case, it is 1,000. So we have from 10 to 50,000. Now, the first difference between a trend and a comparison chart lies on the graph itself. When you look at the graph, and on the graph, you see time-related elements on the graph. I'm not talking about the legends. I'm talking about the graph itself. You see time-related elements. That is a trend chart. Like this one, you have the years from 1990 to 1994. This is 100% a trend chart. This is also a trend chart, and this one as well. But when you do not see the time difference on the graph itself, that's a comparison chart. Like this one, you do not have any time-related elements here, right? So this is a comparison chart. Now I'm emphasizing again on looking for time-related elements on the graph itself, not the legends, not the notes, not anything else. So now you know what a trend looks like and what a comparison looks like, and you know what to look at to determine between a trend and a comparison chart. Now I'm going to tell you very briefly what you need to do for each kind of charts over here so that you can apply right away in your writing. But keep in mind that with different kinds, with different tasks, we will focus on different things. That is why I have the entire big section of my Everything IELTS, the comprehensive guide to IELTS, dedicated to teaching you everything you need to know about IELTS Writing Task 1, the academic module. So if you want to find something that is comprehensive and something that is personalized and something that is good for you, no caps, no fluff, no nothing, just purely evaluations in my dedication to you. Join my Everything IELTS preparation plans for unlimited support and benefit. But in this video, I'm going to share with you briefly what you need to do for each kind of graph so that you can apply right away. All right, so here is what you need to do for a trend chart. Whenever you have a trend chart, there are two things that you need to do in your graph. Because it's called a trend, you are going to describe the changes over time of each category, or in other words, the changes over time of each line, increasing, decreasing, stabilizing, fluctuating, everything that relates to the changes over time of something, the changes in number of something. The second thing is the extent of the changes. And in order to determine the extent of the changes or how much something changes, you need to look at the overall graph. Sometimes a change of 10 is a big change if the average change is only 1 or 2. But the same change of 10 would be a very small change if the average change is 100. And also, depending on the extent of the changes, you can decide whether it is worth it to include this change in your report, because in IELTS Writing Task 1, the academic module, you are supposed to pick the most significant features to describe. You're not going to describe everything, right? Now, let's talk about comparison charts. The name suggests already, right? A comparison chart requires you to make comparisons. So you need to compare between the lowest and the highest, which one's lower, which one higher. In general, before you can make comparisons, you need to have rankings. So the most important thing and the core value of a comparison chart is to describe the rankings of each and every category in the chart. One pro tip for you when you write a comparison chart report is to map out the rankings before you write. But does it mean that in a trend chart report, you shouldn't be making any comparisons? No. It is highly recommended that you make some comparisons, but you need to remember this. We are picking out the most significant features to describe. We are not describing just anything. So we are going to make comparisons between the lines. For example, in this case, we have the blue and the black line. Overall, which one was higher? But this feature has to be visible, like visibly important. You look at the graph and you see the distinction right away, or the highest and the lowest point of a graph. But there are situations that are confusing for you to determine between a trend and a comparison, like this one and this one. I want to remind you to look at the axis. If you see time-related elements, that is a trend. If you don't see any time-related element, that is a comparison. So in this case, even though it does look like a comparison, it is actually a trend because there are time-related elements here, and it becomes this. But in this case, even though there are years over here presented, they are not presented on the axis. So if I change these years into A and B like this, it doesn't confuse you anymore, right? This is the basic of IELTS Writing Task 1, the academic module graphs. But of course, with different tasks, we will need different strategies and different approaches to make sure that our reports are logical, because at the end of the day, let's face it, right? A logical report will get you much better band scores. Join my Everything IELTS preparation plans for unlimited supports and benefits, and learn everything you need to know about not only IELTS Writing Task 1, the academic module, but everything about the IELTS exam. But for now, you can get free practice tests, tips, and IELTS apps and tools on practicenight.co. I'll see you there. For now, you have fun learning. Bye.